Hello, everybody, and welcome to my podcast, Pep Talks. I am your hostess, Kat Frisby, aka Pepper, a licensed realtor in Colorado, and these podcasts are my real estate podcasts. In these episodes, I am interviewing professionals in every realm of the market of Colorado real estate, as well as talking about real estate myself. So, hopefully, you'll be able to pick up on tips, tricks, and tools for you to be able to buy, sell, or invest in the Colorado real estate market. Here we go. Hey, everybody. Today I am interviewing Jim Webster with Wildfire Partners. He is the Wildfire Mitigation Program Manager for Boulder County. Jim designed and leads Wildfire Partners. It is a nationally recognized public and private partnership to help homeowners prepare for wildfire. Jim has designed and implemented innovative partnerships for more than 30 years. In addition to his 15 years working for Boulder County, he's worked for organizations such as Trees, Water, and People, World Wildfire Fund, and the Peace Corps. Jim received his master's in environmental management from Duke University. This guy's awesome. I can't wait for you guys to hear this podcast. Hello, everybody. I am interviewing guest star Jim Webster of Wildfire Partners. There have been a lot of changes in the world lately. We all need to be more educated, and Jim Webster is the head honcho there. So, Jim, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm with Boulder County, our government here in Colorado, and I'm the Wildfire Mitigation Program Manager and lead our Wildfire Partners program.
So we have a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to jump right in. So what is Wildfire Partners exactly, and when did the program begin?
Wildfire Partners is Boulder County's wildfire mitigation program. It was launched in 2014. So it's the program, as the name implies, has lots of partners. So Wildfire Partners is led by Boulder County, but it includes realtor associations like the Boulder and Longmont Realtors Association and a number of different partners.
What are the goals of Wildfire Partners?
So our goal is to help homeowners prepare for wildfire. We're looking at saving lives and saving homes during wildfire. So we need to take action, mitigation, before a fire ignites, and then we can reduce the risk to that loss of life and the loss of the home. So Wildfire Partners' goals are to empower homeowners to take action to reduce their risk. And some of those major topics include hardening your home and creating defensible space.
Yeah. We live out in the mountains, my family and I, and we had somebody come out actually to address our own home, and it was very fascinating to find out what could be changed so that we could be more resistant to all the potentials. Well, why is wildfire mitigation becoming more and more important every year?
So we've entered an era of climate-driven wildfires. With increasing temperatures, wildfires are becoming more frequent, larger, more intense, more destructive. So climate change has a direct relationship to wildfire. And so as the climate increases in temperature, we're going to see more and more wildfires with increased growth, number of people living, building in the wildland urban interface where wildfire risk is high. We're going to see more wildfires in the future. So we need to take action now to prepare for that change. So we can't just look at the past to look at, oh, I had a wildfire in my area in the past, I have wildfire risk. I didn't have a wildfire in my area in the past, so I don't have any risk. And that's not the case. We can't look at the past to predict the future. We know from our great science that's looking at relationships between temperature and wildfires that we're going to see an increase in the number and intensity of wildfires. So we need to prepare now.
Yeah, we had the Cold Springs fire come through behind our house, and I think that it's an honest mistake for people to think, well, if we've had one here recently, there's not a lot of risk. That's very untrue. There's still a lot going on here that could easily be in danger.
That's correct.
So what do you mean by the ignition potential of a home?
So each home has a different ignition potential. So we think of a spectrum or a scale. Something that's low ignition potential is really hard to ignite. We could all live in bunkers, but no one wants to do that, like a windowless structure underground. That would be a very low ignition potential, something very hard to ignite. So we have a scale. Some homes are easier to ignite, and we can, through mitigation, lower that ignition potential. And we often tell the story that everybody's familiar with as the three little pigs. And that house of straw, that has a lot of ignition potential. That's a high risk structure. House of sticks, a little bit more protective. That house of bricks has that lowest ignition potential. So when we look at homes, we look at their vulnerabilities and the pathways of fire, and we can take action before a fire ignites to harden that home to prepare. So we're ready, and those homes then can survive or have a much greater chance of surviving because they won't ignite.
I see. Okay. Is your scale somewhere from like 0 to 10?
We actually don't put numbers. We look at, in generalities. There are things called wildfire scores that are calculated. And so some people do put a number, but our idea is that every home we can reduce that ignition potential. So we can take it from a high risk home, mitigate it, and then it lowers that ignition potential. So we don't actually assign a score to each home, but we look at the vulnerabilities and reduce the vulnerabilities. And so essentially they're reducing their risk. And we're talking about probabilities and reducing risk by reducing that ignition potential.
Right, right. Yeah, and I understand that you can get Wildfire Partners certified and have a yard sign. So what are the benefits of that?
Right. So it's really that recognition. So people who take action to reduce their ignition potential, to reduce their risk. So they're hardening their home, they're creating defensible space, reducing those vulnerabilities and pathways. So they're doing that mitigation. People have been doing it for years, but you need to be recognized for that, right? In terms of an incentive or an acknowledgement. So our certification program is a process for that homeowner to be recognized for meeting those mitigation standards that we've established. So people can then get a yard sign that tells their neighbor that I'm mitigated, and they can tell the fire department that this home has been mitigated, and then it gets that recognition. We provide a certificate that homeowners can provide to their insurance companies to show that they've met a mitigation standard. So it's a way to recognize the effort. And it starts with an assessment. So we have wildfire mitigation specialists that will come out and create a customized plan for homeowners. And they'll look at all the vulnerabilities and risks and then give them a report and a checklist. And it's like everybody will have a certain number of tasks, priority tasks, to reduce their ignition potential, to help reduce the risk of their home igniting. And once they complete those, then we come back and inspect and then recognize that effort with a yard sign and a certificate. And one important factor of mitigation is it's not a one-time event. It's important to maintain that mitigation. And so we'll come back and re-inspect and recertify. And our yard sign has a sticker, an annual sticker, just like a license plate, so you can become recertified. So it's not a one-time activity mitigation. It's important to continue the mitigation over time. So everybody who joins Wildfire Partners commits to do mitigation over the course of their time in their home. So it's not a one-time event. And so that certification process, we were the first in the country to sort of recognize and acknowledge that homeowner activity with science and professional wildfire mitigation specialists. So it's not like we're handing out certificates to everybody in terms of it's something you have to earn and meet the standards of mitigation, the national recognized science-based standards. So that's really important, and we'll get into more with realtors when you're helping your customers sell homes or buy homes to really look for that Wildfire Partner certificate to upload that to the MLS listing. So that's why we have a great partnership with realtors, is we're helping to provide that technical assistance and identify those homes that have been mitigated, met that minimum standard. There's always more to do, right? Mitigation never ends, but have started that process. So it's a really important recognition and a way of tracking that mitigation that's important.
Yeah, sure. And I appreciate that it's something that should regularly and it would regularly have to be updated because just as you had just said, this isn't something to reflect back on the past. Things are changing, things get updated, things wear and tear over time. whether or not you have a natural disaster.
All
So
right, trees grow.
yeah, they need to be re-inspected. Absolutely. Right. Well, related to the certification, I think that an area where some people are a little bit hazy, and maybe you know a little bit about this, is that some insurance companies are requiring now this certification. Is that true, or do you know much about this?
No, it's not the case. I mean, each company will have their own standards. And
Uh-huh.
so, based on the location of a property, they'll have mitigation measures that they want to see performed in order to write a policy or renew a policy. So each company will have mitigation standards. And so the companies recognize our standards because it's a gold star, top of the line, recognized professional science-based standard. But they might accept a home that doesn't have our certificate because they've inspected it and it meets their standard. But it's an easier way for them to recognize the certified homes. But some companies are taking advantage of our technical and financial assistance and sending all their customers and strongly suggesting they obtain a certificate. And someday it could happen where in practice, they sort of say, yeah, in order for us to insure you, you need a wildfire partner certificate, but it's not a formal written policy for many insurance companies. But all companies are looking at mitigation in a way to reduce risk based on the cost. When a wildfire happens and a number of homes are destroyed, that really impacts all of our costs for insurance. So anything we can do to reduce the number of homes destroyed, those actions, those mitigation actions are strongly encouraged or in some cases required by different parties.
Thank you for clarifying that. That was an area of confusion for a lot of people I know. So thank you very much. How can realtors, and I have a little story about this too, but how can realtors help stage a home to highlight the wildfire mitigation reports or efforts that they have?
Yeah, I think realtors are very good at staging the inside of a house. They understand those details are really important and can increase the value of the home. I have stories of going through houses, looking at and opening that closet that's just full of clutter, and you just get an icky feel when a home is not staged correctly.
Right.
In Wildfire, we really focus on the staging of the outside of the house. Naturally, people might spend more time looking at the inside of the house, but it's really important to take your clients and tour the outside of a home they're looking to buy, and also when you're selling to prepare the outside of the home. So you're really staging the outside of the home. And to start with, you can just think of the aesthetics. I mean, just the things that look ugly or cluttered, or that garbage that's been pushed underneath the deck, or things behind the fence that you're trying to hide. You don't want to hide that. You want to remove it from the property because people are going to look underneath the deck and behind the shed. And so it's just like the closet. You can't just stuff everything in the closet and say, oh, this home is ready to be shown. You got to remove that material from the premises. So you're starting by just the aesthetic look of that outside of the home. You don't want those dead vegetation, those dried trees, the leaves and the litter and that clutter. You want to remove all those things like scrap lumber and the stuff that we store and think we're going to use later. And people are often very willing to do that because this is a transition. They're looking to sell their home and get as much money as they can. So you're really looking at that outside of the home to look as attractive as possible. And then we get into some specific mitigation measures. And there's a long list. I mean, we have 50 questions on our assessment, and I won't go through them all now, but we're really looking at pathways and vulnerabilities. And so things that have high density in vegetation, especially junipers. So we have a junk the juniper campaign in our rebate program. We're paying people to junk their junipers. So if you see junipers on that property, those are the first things to ignite and they burn very hot. So we want those removed. Often vegetation that's very close to the home. You should be able to walk around a home. We offer a rebate, what we call the first 5 feet. This is the most important zone of defensible space, that first 5 feet around the structure to be mitigated. Because if direct flames contact the home, it's going to ignite. So we don't want that flame contact. So we want to create space between any vegetation in the home. So when you walk around a home, you should be able to stretch out your arms wide. I can't show you in the camera. Sort of touch one hand up against the siding and be able to walk all the way around the home and not encounter any vegetation. You want that first 5 feet clear. Even above you, you don't want branches hanging over homes, or below you, you want a hard surface. You want wood mulch. So the first 5 feet is another very important area. We call it the non-combustible zone, and we have a rebate program. She'll be looking at that. And really the idea is also looking for that Wildfire Partners yard sign when you're staging the home, or to get that before you sell the home. One of the big things realtors can do is informing their customer that it takes time to mitigate, so prepare in advance. And there's several other things you can look for when you're staging the home or walking around a home outside that we can talk about. We have another campaign for screening the vents. And so vents are a way that embers enter into a home, and you want those screened. A fourth campaign we have is fences or fuses. So if they have fences leading out to the wildland right to the home, that acts like a fuse. So we want to make sure that that fence is not touching the home, the wooden fence. I'm talking about the cedar shake privacy fences. So we mitigate that first 5 feet. So there's things that realtors can learn through our website and our materials and our videos of what you want to look for on the outside of the home. But the first thing you look for is a Wildfire Partners yard sign and certification, and that will indicate that some mitigation has taken place. But it's really important to sort of stage that outside of the home in advance. And then when you're looking to walk around those outside of the homes and look for things that'll burn. Just think of like you're searching for kindling out in the forest to start a campfire. If you're finding little things that can easily burn, they shouldn't be there, right? We want to get that neat and tidy and decluttered on those homes, so that outside is, you want that vegetation well watered, nice and green. Just like it's great to show a home in the spring because that the flowers, the yard looks its best, and you want that yard looking its best with well hydrated vegetation that's spaced out. We don't like that continuity of fuels, so creating spaces between vegetation so there's not a pathway like a fuse that can get that fire from the outside of the property into the home. And there's more we could talk about there, but that's the idea, is really staging that outside of the home to look as attractive as possible to get as high a price for that home as a seller, and then as a buyer to buy a home that has the lower risk is what you're really looking at.
Right. Yeah. So, in your recommendation here in summary is for realtors to have Wildfire Partners come out and do an assessment. A couple of personal stories. One is I know of a home not too long ago that was on the market, and they had a lot of trees really close to the house. And so, in their offer, it stated on the MLS that they would either mitigate by removing trees, and they had priced it all out, and that would take X amount of time, or they would give the buyer that amount of money in order to do it themselves. So that was a good example of
Right.
a sell side being able to be smart about what's going on, have already addressed it, have already priced it out, have already looked into it, and then given a couple of different solutions for it.
That's great. And the sooner that can be done, the better, because we also have financial assistance that will help a potential seller prepare and remove those trees in advance. So we have grants and financial awards that will cover the cost or part of the cost of some of that tree removal. And we really want homeowners to do the mitigation and obtain their certificate, not days before they put something on the market, but months or years before. It's like, we
Right away.
started the program in 2014, and more people are doing this every year, but a lot of people procrastinate, right? So if you're thinking about selling your home in the future, or you're working with clients who are thinking about selling the home for the future, really mitigation should be something that's thought about well in advance of that listing. It's something that can take some time. Contractors are busy. And it also, you're living in the home, right? This is just not about selling a home. It's like every member of our community. I mean, we're all members of our community. Realtors are too. They have friends, their clients. It's not just about mitigating before you sell the home. It's about mitigating today so you can live in the home safely. And then eventually you're going to sell that home. But why not perform that mitigation and gain the benefits for yourself and your family right now? Don't wait. So that's really important. Our realtors have been great partners telling everyone this and spreading the word. And that's what we're really asking realtors who become partners with us in education. And we're developing a training program that we'll announce later the year. But you can really help us create a more resilient community, a more attractive community for people who want to live in Boulder and who are able to obtain insurance. Because if all the insurance companies leave, that's really going to slow down the transaction process. And so we want a healthy insurance market and a safe community, or a safer community. We don't say we can ensure safety by mitigation. We're reducing risk. There's always going to be some risk. And so we can't make people safe. We can make people aware of risk and to take action, but we really need to do that for our community sooner rather than later, not waiting right before you're listing a property. You really need to do that proactively upfront right now.
Sure, and this is exactly why we're making this podcast today. As a realtor myself, I want to ensure that as many people can listen to this as possible. You've given a lot of great examples of what to look out for and some items of on a checklist that Wildfire Partners would have when they come out and look at the home. But I would like to bring up also things just briefly
Okay.
about siding and roofing.
Yep.
And for instance, I have a shed outside, and when we had our assessment, one of the things on the checklist was for us to put a skirt around it. Another thing was to move our stack of firewood to X
Mhm.
feet further. So the house itself on the exterior, not just the land, but the exterior of the home, makes a huge difference, a remarkable difference that has been proven time and time again as somebody, as a neighbor of somebody else, having built the exterior of their home with certain material can save them. I won't say will, but it can
Right.
will have a much greater chance of saving the home. So, do you have
We
any?
look in the assessment at every vulnerability in all parts of the house. So you mentioned the roof. The roof is really important. If you have a shake shingle roof, you need to replace it. I mean, we've had a regulation in the county that you can't, build no new roofs since 1989 could be shake shingle. So they're being phased out, but that's very important. And then the maintenance of that roof. We talked about the aesthetics in that, outside um, showing of the house or the staging. We don't want pine needles in the gutters or in the alleys or on top of the roof. So the roof is very important to mitigate openings where embers can ignite. We've talked about screening events. That's siding, and siding replacement can be very expensive. There are obviously non-combustible siding, whether it's stucco or fiber cement, that are much better than combustible siding like wood. It's expensive to change the siding. So we really focus on especially the first 6 inches, the base of walls. We don't want combustible siding because that's where homes ignite, that first 6 inches. So either replacing that siding or having an exposed concrete foundation for the 6 inches. So we look at how to mitigate the risk of that siding igniting, openings, and maintenance. So that siding material is important. And we mentioned a few of the other things. You talked about firewood piles, and not having firewood piles right close to the house. Those will ignite and burn very hot and destroy your home. So we move those firewood piles away from the structure. And really looking at that fuel connectivity, we want to move um, things like firewood piles out of harm's way. A lot of embers accumulate right next to the base of the walls because you get an ember blizzard. Most homes are destroyed by embers, and that during high wind events, those embers are driving sideways like a snowstorm or a blizzard, and then they're all accumulating at the base of the wall. So that base of wall is a really critical place that we look very closely at. We don't want pine needles located there and combustible siding. So we look at sort of 6 inches of non-combustible material, whether it's flashing or exposed foundation or non-combustible siding there, because that's a really vulnerable area for ignition.
Thank you. Thank you for touching. I've interviewed a few people and spoken with a few people whose homes have burned down, and it's a heartache. It really, I mean, it's the trauma that ensues from it, including the loss, is just remarkable. So, I mean, these kinds of things, even just getting your home assessed by Wildfire
Right.
Partners, for everyone here that's listening or watching this, just do it. Just take care of it. Just look into it. See what's available. See what's happening to your home or around your home. See some minor and major things that may be able to be changed. And like Jim is saying here, is there are some ways of getting some financial aid, but we've spoken a little bit about selling homes. I want to touch base for realtors. and the buyers on what they should look for in purchasing a new home.
Right. So we're working right now. People can upload their Wildfire Partner certificate, but it's not a searchable field. So we're trying to make that a searchable field. So when you're doing your searches for prospective homes to buy, that you're able to tell which ones have been mitigated. So we're working on that. So certainly look for those Wildfire Partners uploaded certificates, and you can look at the yard sign posted at the base of the driveway. And then, I think in terms of, you just mentioned trees up against a home, the scary sort of walking to some homes that make you uncomfortable, right? If you were a firefighter and had to go protect this home, is there space to keep you safe, or is it covered in vegetation? In terms of the maintenance, there's a lot of things that overlap with other benefits in addition to wildfire mitigation. And so those double pane windows, or even tempered glass is even better, or some of the maintenance. So homes that are poorly maintained are really also going to have a higher wildfire risk. But also, it's just not very expensive homes or things that you would think of that are well maintained. They're also at risk, and there's also vulnerabilities. So that's just the initial surface of looking for things that might be scary in terms of the amount of vegetation or where that firewood is stacked. Or, there's things like RVs are very combustible, and RVs parked up against houses. Of course, they're not buying the RV and that can be moved, but there's things in terms of looking at that and asking questions with the wildfire mitigation specialist for Wildfire Partners and looking at certification, asking, what fires have occurred in that area, ingress, egress, some of those issues in terms of the length of the driveway and the safety of evacuation, having multiple. In some cases, there's only one way in, one way out in some communities, but having a second escape route, is a good thing for the people that are risk averse or take more time to leave. So there's some of these factors to think about in advance, just like buying a property in a floodway or a flood zone. It's like, okay, is this something that I want to do? In terms of, it's a little different for wildfire risk because there's wildfires that can happen in a large percentage of the county. We can have, it's not like flood in terms of just looking at a smaller zone. And so understanding, thinking like an ember, or thinking about wildfire, how safe is this home? Structure separation distance is a factor in mitigation because structures are fuel. And when we're in the mountains on larger properties, a lot of that fuel is trees. And we're able, if there's too many trees or that line of trees, like a fuse, that we can create spacing by cutting and removing trees. When homes are tightly packed and the home is the fuel, we're not removing homes as that fuel source. We can harden them, but the larger the property, and also if homes are right on property lines, that's again tougher to create space. A little more structure separation distance increases the safety because of that radiant heat factor. The more distance between the structures or between its ignition source will increase the safety of that home. Homes that are closer packed together, mitigation strategies are tougher. So that's another factor that some buyers might want to consider.
Thank you. So now we can go back to this part, is who's responsible to pay for and perform and maintain wildfire mitigation measures?
Right. We have some financial assistance through Wildfire Partners in Boulder County, and we're using that as an incentive for early adopters to take action and be good role models for the rest of the community. The idea that government is going to pay for all mitigation is not realistic. There's so many homes and the cost of that. So the expectation that a federal or state or local grant or financial assistance is going to pay for your mitigation is really not realistic. It's the responsibility of the homeowner. It's a cost of home ownership now. That insurance cost is increasing, and just like your plumber and electrician and other things you pay for as a homeowner, that wildfire mitigation and reducing that risk, is the cost of home ownership, and it's going to increase the cost of living in Boulder County. And we already have very high cost, right? But we also have high risk, and in terms of that responsibility of paying for that risk, the residents of Boulder County are going to pay for that risk in terms of insurance premiums. And we have other parts of the country that are high risk. We look at Florida with losses or potential losses with hurricanes. they're paying for that risk. It's not necessarily Boulder residents who are paying for that risk, but we're going to be paying for that wildfire risk and the cost of mitigation. And be an early adopter, get some financial assistance. And our financial assistance is mostly targeted at people with limited income. So we provide more assistance to folks that really need that support. So the expectation that a federal or state grant or local grant is going to pay for all your mitigation, I wouldn't expect that. We're here to help, and there is some financial packages to help with some things. Boulder County has a rebate program. So we will give you a $500 rebate for performing 4 calls to action, and this year we're increasing the calls to action. So that rebate is to help offset some of the cost. And so we also have financial assistance for forestry assistance and free chipping. And so there are programs that will help reduce the cost. We have community forestry sort yards where you can deposit material for free, but there are going to be costs of home ownership, and that is going to increase the cost. And it's part of the reality of living in a very high risk situation here in Boulder County. We're one of the highest risk areas in the country when it comes to wildfire risk.
Oh, that's a lot of information to absorb. I actually didn't know that last piece. Well, you already mentioned this, but I suppose still ask. It's just in the future, what do you think? I'll say it this way: what do you think the requirements will hopefully be for the requirement of having a wildfire mitigation certificate?
Right. So right now, the county has both regulatory and voluntary ways that people perform mitigation. So some people are required to perform mitigation. If you're building a new home, if you're pulling a building permit for a deck or an addition, or you need a license for a short-term rental, Airbnb, VRBO, you'll be required to perform mitigation. The county has these tools to require mitigation. But for the vast majority, we want people to voluntarily perform these actions. And our hope is that we can convince enough people to do this voluntarily. There's some who believe that we won't get there with incentives and that voluntary approach that will require some regulation. There's been legislation at the state level introduced that would require a certificate at the point of sale. We didn't support that. It may come to fruition at some point if we continue to have a lot of destructive wildfires and a lack of mitigation, that it could be required someday that in order to sell the home, you need a certificate to prove that you perform mitigation. Right now, that's not the case. And so our really incentive is, that's why we want to work with realtors now, is to get as many people mitigated to show that we've reduced our risk as a community, that we can have insurers feel that it's comfortable to write policies here. So we want to do it voluntarily. But in terms of, don't want to be naive or think that there's no possibility that regulations or things like the recent state proposal that didn't become law, where a certificate would be required at the point of sale, we'll try a different approach. So that's why we really want to emphasize the importance of everybody going out and not just only working individually. We focused on that so far, but it's also important to work with your neighbor and work as a community. And so you can reduce your risk by doing all the things to your individual home that we've talked about. But you're asked to also work with your neighbor and your community to do some community-wide mitigation or to coordinate things with your neighbor, because if your neighbor home ignites, that's going to increase the risk of your home igniting. So if you can help your neighbor and your neighbor mitigates the homes, that's going to reduce risk for other people as well. So we're connected as a community when it comes to wildfire risk. So that's why it's really important for realtors to be leaders. And they have been those last 12 years in Wildfire Partners. Realtors have stepped up and helped spread the word. We have 4,000 people in the program. We've got essentially halfway to our goal, or a little bit more of our goal in the mountain communities, but we have more people to work with and more mitigation to perform. So we really need to step up our efforts and encourage people. And events like the fires in LA bring home to people that, yes, this is a reality. We can try to ignore it. It's not happening to me. It's not going to happen in my community. It might not happen every day or every year, but that doesn't mean there's not a risk. And so taking some of these very common sense, sensible actions now, just a good peace of mind, good thing for your community and your neighbors, and a good thing for everybody to perform.
Sure. And I want to take this opportunity to say to anybody watching or listening that if you've gotten this far in this podcast, and I greatly appreciate you, and you want to give more information to people that you know that could use that information, I myself or Jim Webster are at his website. We can answer questions, we can summarize things, and we can help out right away. So please don't hesitate to contact your friends or family or anyone that you care about or know that lives in an area like Boulder County and have them contact me or Wildfire Partners right
Right.
away. Um,
And so we have a website, wildfirepartners.org, and hotline and email address, wildfirepartners, info@wildfirepartners.org. We have a lot of programs we haven't talked about. Our certification program, something to emphasize, is in Western Boulder County. So we come and do the assessments and the certification for folks that are west of Boulder, who live in the foothills, the mountains, the forested areas. So that's what we've talked a lot about. We're building our programs in Eastern Boulder County. There's no certificate process in Eastern Boulder County, but we come and support community mitigation efforts based on the housing patterns and the density. So we're looking to get communities engaged in the East and working towards mitigation efforts. So depending on where you live in Boulder County, you have different opportunities and different services and different programs. The rebate's available to everybody in the county, including the city of Boulder. So I work for Boulder County. The city of Boulder has a different wildfire mitigation program that does very similar things, and they're here to support city of Boulder residents as well.
Thank you. So my husband, who is also a realtor, he came to basically like a pilot course, if you will, run by Wildfire Partners um, to address realtors. And hopefully at some point you all will be able, as Wildfire Partners, you guys will be able to make those courses CE credits and more continuous so that realtors could be educated.
Yeah, Wildfire Partners is working with BOLO Realtors, Boulder and Longmont Realtors, to develop a course for realtors. We've got approval for CE credits. It's still in development, so we don't have all the details yet, but look, sometime this year we'll be announcing a course for realtors where we'll go more in depth on wildfire mitigation and develop our partnership and work together. And so not quite ready to announce an official launch of the program, or we don't have the application up live, but that's coming in the future. So we're looking forward to working even more closely with realtors, and we're hoping to have that course available later in 2025. It's certainly in the planning stages.
Gosh, I hope so. Let me know if there are any signups, and I will
Yes,
share
we will.
that.
We'll follow up with lots of communication for that once it's ready.
Great, awesome. I live, as I mentioned earlier, the Cold Springs fire came through. Actually, looking out my window right now, I'm looking at a dead forest. I don't know if you know much about this specific area behind Ridge Road, but could you speak to at all how the homes out here fared through that fire, specifically related to how they were or were not really prepared for something like that?
Right. And so we had actually met with the fire chief earlier in the year and sort of asked him what some of his community concerns are, high risk communities, or communities he was specifically concerned about. And he identified your community as something that was particularly high risk where we needed to do more work.
Yeah.
Wildfire Partners had some activity in the county with our mitigation requirements, had activity in that area. We had 19 homes that we had worked with mitigation through Wildfire Partners and our building code requirements. All 19 of those homes survived. 8 of the neighborhoods did not. And there's several factors, of course, when you're involved into a home survival. Some of those homes survived without any firefighter intervention. Sometimes homes survive as a combination of mitigation and suppression efforts working together. But the idea that mitigation really does reduce that ignition potential and can help save your home. And that knowledge of what to do when you evacuate is really important. We talk about shutting your door and closing garage door too, because you can do perfect mitigation, but you evacuate and you leave a door open or window open, those embers are going to enter and burn down your home. So it's being prepared for that evacuation closing those windows and shutting that garage door, and doing the other things when you evacuate. So we can help reduce that risk. And again, the intensity and the fire behavior, when you have 100-mile-an-hour winds, and depending on flame lengths and that heat generated, and we talked about structure separation distance, that mitigation really can help you, but it doesn't guarantee your survival. So they're still important to get that home inventory done, where you know the contents of that home through a home inventory, whether it's photo records, video records, written records, and make sure you have proper insurance. A lot of people are underinsured if they don't regularly check on their insurance. So mitigation is part of the equation we're talking about here, but the other preparedness things in terms of evacuation, making sure you're signed up for those notifications with our Office of Disaster Management. And yeah, the Cold Springs fire, that mitigation really did help firefighters and really did help save homes.
Jim, thank you so much for all of the information that you have today. Everybody, if you have more questions, please reach out. You can go to the website at www.wildfirepartners.org. That's www.wildfirepartners.org. Or you can email at info@wildfirepartners.org or call at 303-441-1420. Or you could also reach out to me, and I'm cat.frisby at compass.com. That's cat.frisby at compass.com. Jim, thank you. Do you have anything else to share?
I just want to thank you for your time and your motivation. We need leaders in our community to help communicate the message and to get prepared for the future. So it takes a lot of effort from a lot of people, but it's really worthwhile. I want to thank you for all your efforts and being a leader in your community and taking these actions, because it really will make a difference in future wildfires.
Thank you. And I can't press this enough that, just at least get the assessment done right away, everybody, please, because this is self-care. This is, it's not, oh, well, maybe one day my house will never burn down or something. Just take care of it. It's just another thing to take care of, and that's okay. We're out here for each other. And I don't want to see anybody suffer the way that people in LA are right now, and the way that I've seen some people that I've interviewed have to go through. So thank you. Thanks, Jim. Well,
Thank
bye.
you so much.
Closing out. Have a wonderful day, everybody.